Okay, so the game here is Fleet, and I'm doing this as a quick break from Kingdom of Heaven over there. Now, this is a game that intrigued me a little bit when I first saw it, and Joel Eddy, who does the drive-through reviews, kickstarted it, but also managed to get a review copy, and he offered me a copy of it. Pretty much nobody else on the team was terribly interested in it, probably because of, well, the theme more than anything. Fishing generally isn't terribly exciting to people. To me, it immediately hooked into my mouth, as it were, and drew me in, because one of the things one of the things that attracted me to it immediately was this concept of licenses versus fishing boats. And that's, of course, the main mechanism within the game is, and we'll go over that in a bit. Okay, so why is that exciting to me? Well, because if you've ever been in sort of particular Pacific Northwest, the fishing licenses there's people who hold, these family licenses, and they're actually worth a fortune. But they're still kind of doing small-scale fishing, whereas you've got big corporations trying to obtain them. And I thought maybe this game would reflect the rarity of these licenses in an interesting way, or at least cast some light on it. I'm afraid it doesn't really, but that whole competition for the licenses and what could be involved in that definitely excited me. And then when I saw kind of the mechanisms that are involved in the game, that sounded interesting as well. Unfortunately, the two don't really meet. It's primarily a game, and it could represent that fairly well. It's just it doesn't focus on the aspects that were so intriguing to me. So let's talk a little bit about the game, because the game itself is very simple. Now, I have I don't know, the expansion here that came with the Kickstarter, and it's got some additional cards. I'm not going to play with that. It adds more complex decisions and choices and possibilities to the whole thing. But my feeling is I've only played this once so far, not solitaire, and I'm looking at those as kind of a, yeah, someday I'll break into those to add something to this if I've played it enough that I want to add something to it. Right now, it's, at a fairly limited place. Okay, so let's take a look, because we've got a very, very simple sequence of play here. And it's spelled out on these player aid cards, which give you the sequence of play on one side, and some little symbols on the other side to let you know what the different things on the cards are going to mean. That's important because the licenses contain a sort of pictorial representation of what they give as bonuses. Okay, at the beginning of the game, there are going to be some of these special premium licenses. These are going to be hidden so that they don't come out at the very beginning. That's one of the rules, sort of, even in the options. They get buried a little bit. And it's good, because if somebody were stuck with the option of buying one of these or nothing, these probably wouldn't be what they want. So it's giving some guarantee of some decent cards that they want. Now, the licenses allow you to launch ships of a given type. By the way, if you're really into, learning the rules to a game, I'm not the person to watch them for. I know Joel has done a rules overview that I'm sure is better than mine, but this helps me think about the game and talk about it a little while I'm casting through it. Okay, so the game starts out with a series of these out in play, and each player has the same starting cards, which is going to be one of each different type of fishing boat cards or whatever. Now, these cards have a number of different pieces of information on them right off the bat. First of all, they have an amount of gold that they're worth, which is noted down here. A little picture of the fish and of the boat, great. A cost that it would cost to put this boat into play in cash, and that'll be these coins here. And then a number of victory points that boat will be worth at the end of the game for just having it. Licenses, well, licenses also have a cost. This is the minimum cost. They're going to go in an auction. A number of victory points for holding them at the end of the game. And then a special bonus that you get based on the different licenses. And these are all represented pictorially in a way that matches this and usually requires you to figure them out for quite some time before, until you're used to the game. Okay, so every turn is going to start off the same way, and it's got these 5 phases in it. The first one is licensing auctions, and each player in turn in this little yellow boat, by the way, all these blue cubes, these are crates of fish. Now, they are a limited commodity. They're a bank that as you use it and take these crates of fish onto your ships, sure, it gets depleted, but then when you turn crates of fish in as money or for cards or whatever, if for any reason you're spending crates of fish, they pretty much go back in the box. And that's that's sort of one of a couple of time limits in the game. That one keeps, once all the crates of fish are gone, basically, the game is over. Okay, so licensing the auction, you're allowed to spend money from your cards towards these bidding costs. And you must bid at least the minimum cost for the item. Now, bidding, if I remember correctly, goes around in an open fashion, and orderly as well. And once you buy a license in a turn, you're out. You can't buy another one that turn. You can't bid on another one. So each player selects a license in order. The first player selects one. If he wins it, that's great. He's out. If someone else wins it, well, he's not going to get to select the next one, unless, of course, it's only a 2-player game. The game holds 2 to 4 players. Okay, so whoever picks last has a limited number of options available, but he can pick them up at the cheapest price, at the minimum cost, without having to worry about anybody bidding against them. So the second thing is launch boats and hire captains. Now, the basic rules say you can launch one boat and you pay the cost, and that'll be in coins, but possibly in processed fish. And you pay the cost listed on the card, but you can't launch a boat unless you have a license for it. Now, here's where I get kind of a little weirded out. Those licenses are not tied on a per boat basis. So if you have a lobster license, you can launch lobster boats. There's other factors in this that kind of feel a little weird here, which we'll get to in a moment. And then once you launch your single ship, now some of these licenses will allow you to launch more than one ship, perhaps. I seem to remember that. We'll see it as the licenses come out, and we'll talk about what their advantages are through the playthrough. But after everybody's gotten their option to launch a boat and paid for whatever they do, and you don't get any change here. If you're spending cards, you spend the full amount on the cards that you discard. After that, you can play cards face down. Well, play one card face down, but again, there might be licenses that affect all the aspects of this game. Face down on a launched ship, and that captains the ship. The reason you want a ship to be captained is, well, you can't fish without it. As far as I can see, you still get victory points for an uncaptained ship. So that may be a little pressure at the end of the game. Phase 3 is fishing. Every ship that you have that's got a captain gets a box of fish on it. That includes, and this is one of the things that bugs me, the processing vessel. I don't know what they're fishing for. I kind of like to think of it as processed fish, so they're pulling cans of tuna up or something. I don't know. Anyway, even the processing vessel pulls fishing. And fish are kind of not distinguished in this game. They're just crates of fish. It doesn't matter what you got. Fish is fish, right? Okay. The limitation there, though, is no ship can have more than 4 cubes on it. So if you've already fished 4 times with your ship and you got nowhere to put your cubes, you can't keep fishing. Your ship's like running low in the water or something. Then we go to processing and trading. And at this point, each of your boats, if you happen to have a processing vessel license, you can shift 1 cube from the boat to the processing vessel license. Now, there's an issue with this, which is not in terms of a problem with the game, but a reason you don't want to do this, which is crates of fish on ships are worth victory points. Crates of fish on your processing license are not. So you may not wish to move them there. There's an advantage to having them there, though. Crates of fish on a processing vessel count as gold, as you can see here, and you can trade them in. Let's see what this other advantage is. Okay, the other advantage is you can trade crates of fish depending on the number of licenses you have, and these licenses all work this way. Like, I have 1 license, okay, I can do this. I have 2, well, I get this ability instead, 3, etc. So in this case, I can trade up to 4 cubes for 4 cards. Here, I can only trade 1 cube for a card. Cards are worth more than gold. As you can see, almost every card has at least 1, and most of them have more than 1 gold. So if you want to create the most cash on hand with your cards, well, having a fishing, or with your cubes, you need a processing vessel license, because that's the only way you can convert fish into money. And, well, the more fish you can convert, the more cubes you can convert into money. Well, the more cubes you have, the more processing vessel licenses you have, the more cubes you can convert into cards instead of just money. And that money can be used for anything. Of course, when it's used, when the cubes are used either to draw a card or to use as money, they go out of the game. Because once fished, they don't go back in. Of course, when I was playing, I got that kind of screwed up. I read the rule and got it right, but then I started throwing them back in the pool of fish, and that's where the whole joke about I'm pulling up processed fish came from. Okay. The final phase is that everybody draws, and this is in the base rules, 2 cards and discards 1. Discards are all face down. You don't get to see it. It's just this mass, a little mess in the pile. And if the deck runs out, well, you reshuffle it. Okay, now, there are things that will affect the number of captains you play, the number of cards you draw, how many you keep, and how many do you discard, and all kind of stuff like that based on the licenses. And we'll get to those as they come out, and you'll get kind of a feel how this all interacts. But there's a lot going on there. In addition to these licenses, there's the special licenses. For example, the Fisherman's Pub is just a big 10 victory points. That's, given that it's $10 and 10 victory points, it's a good price to earning ratio there. The King Crab, similar to that, except you can, your crates of fish end up being extra victory points there at the end of the game. And I think those are the only specials in this one. Okay, well, how does the game end? How do you win? The game ends in 2 ways. One is, if you can't refresh the pool of licenses, there's always going to be a pool. When I played, I think there were 2. I think there's 1 per player. So there's always, but I am not certain about that. So if someone buys licenses and you can't pull more off the top of the deck, the game ends at that point. Well, at the end of the current round. And then the other way is if the fish run out, again, you play out the rest of the round using fish from the pool that have been discarded already or whatever, and then you end the game. For the actual scoring, you total up the victory points on your licenses, on your ships. Each crate of fish on a boat is worth a victory point, but not on the processing thing. You get additional victory points from these bonus cards. Well, from the King Crab. This one just comes with 10. And then you total it up, and whoever has the most wins. If you're tied, whoever has the most launched boats wins. It doesn't say out of the tied players, but that's kind of implied. Because it says then, if still tied, the player with the most crates of fish on boats wins. If still tied, these players enjoy a shared victory. So, anyway, there's a lot of tiebreaker situations. Chances are it's going to end on victory points, I would guess. That's what we got there. I'm going to wrap this up and send it up, and then, well, I'll start a playthrough.